Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV back with another Market Watch. So yeah, basically this episode is going to be a continuation of the last Market Watch. There were so many cards that I wanted to talk about, I just couldn't fit them all into one episode, so we're gonna continue on with some other things here today. And to be honest, a lot of these are gonna seem really random, kinda out of nowhere, but let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So starting things off for today, we have Majestys Fiend. This is a pretty simple card that used to see play back in like hat format. This is a level 6 monster that cannot be special summoned, and while it's on the field, monster effects cannot be activated. So this is probably one of the hardest floodgates to get rid of in the game right now, as it can single-handedly shut down entire strategies and is able to stop your opponent from also using hand traps on you. This card is currently being talked about because of the Runic deck, a deck that really doesn't summon very much at all. In Runic, you can special summon out your Runic extra deck monsters using your spells, and then at the end of your turn, you tribute one of them for a Majestys Fiend. It doesn't negatively affect the Runic player since they can still activate Runic spells and such from the hand, and you are also able to protect Majestys Fiend using the Runic cards. And I mean, of course, people do play things like Dark Ruler No More nowadays, but I think it would feel pretty bad to have to side in Dark Ruler No More against Runics where they barely play any monsters at all. Fortunately, Majestys Fiend does have several different printings, including a Super and Ultra that are each very easily accessible. However, I believe that Majestys Fiend in Runic topped a regional or something, and it was kind of like the first big showing of the deck, and so people immediately turned to Majestys Fiend and they just tried to buy out the highest rarity version of the card. For now, the secret rares are up quite a bit more than the other printings, with the unlimiteds up to $10 each, and then the secret rare first editions at almost $20 a piece. Personally, I really like the way that Majestys Fiend looks in secret rare, so that's the one that I would want to play with even if it does cost a little bit more. But remember that those budget options are available to you as well, I think from Maximum Gold Eldorado and then Dual Devastator. If you're looking to play Runic and want an easy way to shut off like half to 2/3 of your opponent's deck in this format, Majestys Fiend is definitely an interesting card for you guys to consider. Next up, we're into a weird one here. We have D3s Frog. So this is a really specific fusion monster that has a pretty interesting application in branded tier limits. There is a quick play spell card called Branded in High Spirits that lets you send a fusion monster with 2500 attack or defense points to the graveyard. As long as you reveal a monster with the same type in your hand, you then discard the card from your hand and get to search for a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that lists Fallen of Albaz in its card text from your deck to your hand as well. So this is an interesting tech card for a couple of different reasons. Now, as an Aqua Fusion monster, once you dump this card from your extra deck to the graveyard, it can be used as a fusion material for either Kit Kalos or Dragos Tapelia. But by running this combo as well, since Branded in High Spirits is a quick play spell, it provides you with an alternate way to dump a tier limit monster from your hand to the graveyard during your opponent's turn, potentially allowing you to set up an additional disruption or other body despite your opponent breaking through your initial board. Because of the way that tier limits play, you can even put the D3s Frog back to the extra deck so that it can be dumped again. This is a very old card that was last printed in 2007. Now, the original commons from Shadow of Infinity are about $3 each, which is perfectly fine. I know that the card is quite old, difficult to find in near mint condition. For some reason though, the DRO4 version shows that the lowest listing right now on TCG Player is $35 each, and there are even sold listings at $30 and $34, and the card is just still a common. I can only hope that none of you guys watching this video would make this ridiculous purchase. It seems like for the most part, the card hasn't sold for more than $7 to $8, so I am choosing to disregard those ridiculous sales here. If you guys do have the time, this is definitely a cool card to try to find from your bulk and offload if you can actually find someone that's looking for it. Here we have another strange one. It is Spiritualism. This card hasn't seen play for quite a few years. I think it was used back in 2014 or 2015 as a way to help push through Infernity boards. This is a pretty simple one. You get to return an opponent's spell or trap card from their field back to the hand, and this card can also not be negated by any other card. Pretty simple, but it's worth noting that the card doesn't actually target, which means that if your opponent chooses to chain like their back row, like a super polymerization, something like that, you can select another card to bounce to their hand instead. This is interesting also because this is an out to Mystic Mine, so it's very versatile, although they are able to set it right away the following turn. I think that Triff sided a couple copies of this card in his Tearlament Scareclaw Adventurer deck list, which looked really cool and fun to play. I personally, not too crazy about Spiritualism. I think that there are other more cool options if you're really that worried about Mystic Mine, or other forms of like back row for now. Between like Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twisters, Lightning Storm, Evenly Matched, we have access to a lot of back row removal in the game. At any rate, all versions of this card, there's commons and rares, they're about $2 to $3 each right now. Not too bad of a penny stock that you'll probably have to look through your bulk boxes for. Okay, I know, some craziness here, but there's one more weird one before we get to some cards that are a little bit more noticeable or recognizable. Ojama Duo is a trap card that is relatively new, and by that I mean it came out like 3 to 4 years ago. This card is similar to Ojama Trio, summoning tokens to your opponent's side of the field that cannot be tributed. Now normally you would just be able to use these tokens for like a link summon or something, right? But if you combine this with a card like Rivalry of Warlords, this effectively stops your opponent from being able to use monsters to play the game at all. This card has gotten attention because of the Mystic Mine burn deck, which combines Ojama Trio, Ojama Duo, and Rivalry of Warlords to basically prevent your opponent from doing anything while you kill them very slowly. This one is another random card that's probably going to be sitting around in your bulk, but each of the card's 2 common versions are around $2 to $3 right now. I think that this is probably a card that you guys should look to sell sooner rather than later if you happen to have them, since it is almost certainly only a matter of time before Mystic Mine gets banned and we don't have to deal with that deck anymore. Alright, back to a normal card here. We have Sprite Elf. So this is a Link 2 monster that requires a level, rank, or Link 2 monster to make. It has 2 very relevant effects. The first is that your opponent cannot target monsters that this card points to with card effects. The second is that you can target a level 2 monster in your graveyard, or if your opponent controls a monster, you can target a rank or link 2 instead, and then special summon that monster to your side of the field. Obviously, this is a big card in Sprite, being able to revive a copy of Totally Awesome for an additional negate. However, Sprite Elf probably should have had a more specific summoning requirement because we are finding it to be a very splashable extra deck monster. Even without the protection from targeting, it's still great for various strategies. I know that in Gishki, they use this card to revive Gishki Abyss and proc its search on summon, but also in like Tearlaments, they make this card to revive Merely and then chain IP Masquerena underneath it to summon a Topologic Bomber Dragon or a Zeroboros, and in that way they're able to trigger those boss monsters' effects really easily. Sprite Elf has cooled down a bit. A couple of weeks ago, this was only a $7 to $8 card. It went up as high as $20, but has since then cooled back down to the $15 mark, which is still almost double what it was before. I actually feel like this card is just so generic and splashable that it's going to be a viable card in a lot of other extra decks over the next couple of formats. So if you guys don't own one, I would definitely go ahead and just grab it now. I think that this card will remain relatively high for a new ultra rare until the middle of 2023 when the card finally comes due for its Megaton reprint. Next up, let's take a look at Danger Chupacabra. So the Danger cards are probably some of the craziest, most splashable cards that this game has ever seen. I remember back when it seemed like everyone was just running 3 Nessie, 3 Jackalope, and 3 Tsuchinoko in everything, just as like a draw engine that also got bodies on board for free. Now with Tsuchinoko and Jackalope at 1, the engine isn't as generic, right? But for Tearlaments, it's still a great engine as it can help get key Tearlament monsters into the graveyard and proc their effects. Now one member of the Danger archetype that hasn't gotten as much attention until recently, however, is Chupacabra. It is a bit more awkward to use because if it's discarded, it summons another Danger out of your graveyard, which might situationally not be that great. However, with Tearlaments, you mill so much that you probably have a Danger monster in your graveyard whenever you're using Chupacabra's effect, and even then you're not like hitting the Chupacabra every time, right? On top of that, Chupacabra is a level 4, which means that if you are able to special summon it out, you can use it to make either a Time Thief Redoer or an Abyss Dweller, two very common rank 4s in the tier limit strategy, as part of your end board, which is some additional utility there. The card was reprinted as a common in one of the structure decks, so not a huge deal to find. You should be able to grab a common for like a quarter or so. However, it is worth noting that these secret rares from the 2019 Megatins are now all the way up at $7 a piece, while they were only a couple of dollars before. The original Ultras are actually still only $3 now, which is fairly affordable if you're just looking for a holo copy of the card, right? Personally, I have the Tsuchinoko, the Nessie, Jackalope Mothman. They're all in secret rare, so I like having them match. But the Ultras are the original printing still, so go ahead and pick whichever version you guys like the most, because this generally is just a one-of. Alright, the final card I want to briefly mention for today is Verna Silph of the Flourishing Hills. This card is a member of the Verna Silph archetype, a series of Earth Fairy monsters, where they have like a common effect where you can discard that card plus another monster or a Verna Silph card from your hand to search for a Verna Silph card from your deck and then special summon an Earth monster from your graveyard. Now in theory, I think this could make for some decent like generic Earth support eventually with some archetype, but for now it's kind of whatever. Verna Silph of the Flourishing Hills has an extra effect where your Verna Silph monsters can't be destroyed by card effects. Actually, the whole Verna Silph theme is pretty overlooked, and I think they're all actually in low rarities. Flourishing Hills, I think, is the highest rarity card from the archetype. Now, I remember picking this card up for like 25 cents when it first came out and at our regionals. It just wasn't a good ultra rare, especially compared to other things like the Gigantic Sprite, the Starter, Sprite Elf. But now the card is actually around $3 to $4 a piece, which isn't crazy high, but it's a decent amount, especially compared to what it was when it first came out. I haven't seen any lists or anything like that with the Verna Silph cards. My only guess is that people are like trying something out with the next wave of Verna Silph support that's coming to the TCG in Darkwing Blast, which includes a field spell and a main deck boss monster. I honestly haven't looked into the theme at all myself, other than when I read them when the cards first came out, so maybe someone knows something that the rest of us don't. However, we don't have any concrete evidence thus far, so for me, I am going to assume that this card is kind of just being overhyped too early on and should be sold until we see some results. Okay guys, that is it for today's episode. I think that covers most things. I had a list of cards to talk about that I was constantly adding to on my phone over the course of the YCS weekend, so I think that I covered all of like the important ones. The next couple of weeks are going to be huge. We do have the Megatins coming out this weekend, and I am so excited to crack packs open with my buddies. It's always a good time, and I find it more fun to open product with company. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please do make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today, and also what other cards are trending on the market. And if you haven't already, for whatever reason, make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.